in it? Right, we're locked in.
Ryan, do we have translation?
No, I'm not recording, but I didn't see
Arabic
I'll
speaking
jump out.
translation, yes, should be arriving any minute. There are a couple people that we know speak Arabic in the audience have been told that translation is coming, and Spanish not tonight, but we will have Spanish at the Spanish forum that we plan.
Oh,
Just came out of it,
okay.
but I was just in.
Yeah, go in it.
Let's see if we can see this.
Yeah, MRP, OPODOG.
Oh, that's what you're looking at. Oh, okay, I didn't, okay. Okay. Let's see. No, it's not. Okay. I have, to your defense, been giving you 25 of them. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, I have been giving you so many of them.
Live stream is on. Just
Oh.
so you know.
Yes.
Okay, it should be here shortly. Thank you. It's coming. I can't leave. Nobody talk to me. Two snaps. It must have been good.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Liberty Board of Education special board meeting to order. Ms. Edwards, could you please do the roll call?
Absolutely. I have President Diana Reyes,
Here.
Vice President Barbara Marino, Secretary Amy Pozorski, Mr. Anthony Kane, Miss Annie Parker, Miss Hannah Patrisco, Miss Joan Pina, Mr. Richard Reyes, Mr. Jose Rivera, and Miss Tina Santana.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're so thankful for your interest in this budget. I'm going to try to make it just about half an hour tonight, and we're going to do our best to take a very complicated topic and explain it in a way that people who haven't really dive into it. Firstly, I know there's some people in the audience who are waiting for y para ustedes que hablan español, si hay preguntas alguna, por favor de preguntarme y yo puedo esperar. Yo puedo ayudar y esperar. Okay, so thank you very much for being here tonight. Your participation in this process is more critical than ever. So for those of you who are watching at home, you'll see that we have our narrative, the document we have online. If you came in and happened to miss it, the big budget narrative document is the book over there by Ms. Polito. You can get you one if you didn't get one on your way in. So I'm going to start with the facing this year is a budget like I have never experienced before in my time. This year is my 11th year as a Connecticut superintendent. It's my 30th year as a Connecticut educator. And this year's budget is very, very challenging. So I'm going to take you through and show you why. Also, what we're going to do, though, is part of this budget document is to show what we're doing really well, where we need to continue to get better, and really, I hope to prove that we think New Britain's kids are definitely worth the investment that we're proposing. Also, there's a lot of comparisons, right? I think part of deciding whether or not what we're asking for is reasonable is to look at other school districts. Most especially, we look at other school districts like New Britain. Here in Connecticut, that's called District Reference Group I. We educators, we shorten it, we say DIRG I. Right? There's 7 school districts there. You're going to see a lot of them in the presentation tonight. So let's just dive in. please do interrupt with questions. I'll say, we're going to do our best to answer your questions on it, but if you ask a very, very, very detailed question, I might have to get your phone number later and we'll get back. Okay? Great. So if you take a look on our slides up here in the top left, you'll see the page that is in your document that is being displayed. I'm going to pause for 30 seconds. I encourage you, take a look at page 2. It's the first page after the table. Sometimes, if you're a parent and you have a relationship with Smalley School, or Advanced School, or Smith School, that's the part of our district that you get to know. And it's easy to sometimes lose track of the fact that we are a very big operation. So that's what some of this page is about. So we have over 10,000 students, over 1,500 staff members. So think of how big that is. I don't know exactly, but my guess is our only rival in town would be the hospital, as far as how big of an operation. 220 buses, and imagine we feed our children almost 11,000 meals in a day. 11,000 meals every single day. We always try to do the best we can at all of this. So other celebrations, we're seeing really good graduation rate. That's coming back up. Tons of money, more than $500,000 in scholarships. And New Britain's first ever. So we believe that it's easy to make the case that New Britain's kids really deserve the best they could possibly be. So just a quick look. I'm going to skim through. We have more and more students going. So we're over 10,000 students now. And that has continued to grow really since about 2020. So really right around the time of the pandemic, our enrollment is going up while many other school districts in Canada have dropped. Our enrollment continues to be vibrantly diverse. We continue to have a very strong cross section of races, ethnicities, faiths, and it's a pleasure for me to work here and to serve this community. We have increasing numbers of students who are learning English with us, multilingual learners. And I like to, if you right now, imagine this is a big classroom. This would be a really big classroom. The union would be many of this. Imagine 1 in every 5 of you in this class are learning English. Nearly 20% of our students, 1 in 5 of our students are learning English. And those students are not held off to the side. They're integrated across all of our programs. And we work really hard to provide them the best services we can. You'll see some nice success on that later. Students with disabilities also continues to grow. So students who have what we call an IEP, a specialized plan, 1 in 4. So again, imagine this was a classroom. Look around and imagine up here are getting some type of specialized services. They have a special education. Right? You can see that number continues to grow. You'll see here, and I forgot to note it earlier, those lines, those are those other districts in that district reference. Hartford, New London, New Haven, Wyndham, and Waterbury are our group. So whenever you see multiple lines with multiple districts, it's always to that group. Thanks to our expert communications team over there, they're always this. You want to see what that looks like on another. The document looks very well like that. By placement, and again, you can see this better in the document right in front of you. This is really critical. So we have some students with very substantial needs. And by law, we're required to deliver services on what's called the least restrictive environment, which means not just by law, but we have a moral obligation to keep their education as similar as it can be to other kids' education. So we always want to keep the kids close to home and close to their regular as we can. But so if you look off the top though, the Bridges program is a program that we have in district, spread across a few schools in the district, for students with very substantial behavioral disabilities, when they get services paid. In many other districts, they wouldn't have a specialized program and they would have to get services. Key program, that's primarily for our students with autism. You can see that continues to grow. And our Pathways program are for our physically or multiply handicapped students. Again, these are students where if they went to a smaller town, they would probably have to leave town and be what's called an outplacement in order to get their services. We have these programs here. And you can see if you watch over time, those have continued to grow. Unfortunately, what's also continues to grow is our outplacements. And outplacements are the students with very substantial disabilities. And we have to provide for them by law, morally as well, outside of the. Now, what's critical there, and this you'll find this in every single school district in Connecticut, is that it's incredibly expensive for our school district. On average, a child who goes to an outplacement is about $190,000 per year per kid. So each of those students, the average is $190,000 for that child to be transported and then educated somewhere else. Because even though we try, and even though we have these specialized programs, again, you'll find that across every district in Connecticut. But these are ways in which, and I'm just going to be very blunt with you folks, these are ways in which the legislature is letting us down like really need that. There's a mechanism we reimburse the most of that. Well, we've never gotten the full reimbursement that we are supposed to get. That's true of everything. What that means is very substantial needs. And then they're very costly to all school districts, ours included, have a very strong impact on our local budget, our local tax. Our staff. Again, I'm jumping through the book so you don't have to listen to me talk for 3 or 4 hours. On page 14, you'll see a very, very common question. Every time I've presented a budget, again, this is my 11th time presenting a budget, somebody has said, I heard you're top heavy. I heard you would be just fine if you got rid of all those high-paid administrators. Well, it's not true here. This is these are our comparison districts. Administrators are so only about 2.7% of our total staff is administration. So that means every single one of our administrators, our principals, our vice principals, they're supervising a huge number of staff. 20, 30, 40 staff they may have to do evaluations with on top of all of the other duties of a school leader. So that's in the book just to say, I believe there are many points of evidence in the book that we are very responsible with the public's money. This is one point of evidence for that. Our diversity of staff, Dr. Sanders just joined us, thanks to our talent department, continues to grow. We continue to prioritize diversifying our teaching staff, all of our staff, that continues to grow. Student to teacher ratio, here, low numbers are good numbers. So we have the second lowest teacher to student ratio in our comparison group. Now, it's really just look at the bars, because when you see 11.4, that doesn't mean the average class size is 11.4, because that takes into account all classrooms. You've got very specialized programs with just a very small number of kids in the room. But it's to say, when you compare our class size to our comparison group, we're doing very well. And I hate to see that number go up. I'm sorry, go ahead. Excellent question. So this is whatever is most recently available on the state website. Whenever I'm showing comparison data, it's whatever was the most. Thank you for the question. And we got a lot of questions recently about teacher retention. Like, we have some vacancies. We've been struggling with this since the pandemic. The good news here is, in general, teachers are coming and staying. So of our comparison group, we have the second highest teacher retention. Again, this is the most recently available data on the state. Right? There's plenty of teachers who are worn out and tired, and that's true across the whole profession. But here in New Britain, compared to our peer group, we have the second highest teacher retention. And this is simply from one year to the next. Moving on to our results, which there's a lot to be proud of. There's still some areas of work. But again, I present this because I believe that the school district is a very worthwhile investment in public health. Very worthwhile investment towards our kids. So this is the state test for reading. We are on page 20 now in the book, if it's easier for you to follow along in the book. So for 3 straight administrations of the state test, elementary reading has increased. Fantastic work by everybody involved. Everybody who interacts with kids, all of our school leaders, district leadership, really nice improvement over time. And I say this all the time because I like to admit it, I'm kind of competitive. And I hated the fact that we were down here below everybody else. You can see that's not true anymore, right? About beating the other districts. It's about constant improvement, but it's a testament to the hard work. Look how steep that line goes upwards for elementary math. Now, let me say right out we are not satisfied. They are not yet at a level where we can take a rest. But all of these numbers, at least, the elementary numbers, they are headed in the right direction. Thanks to tons and tons of hard work, lots of arguments between us and teachers, right? Lots of really hard work, but it's paying off. The last 3 administrations were seeing really good growth in the elementary schools. And we have really purposefully invested more resources and time in the elementary level. New series for math a few years ago. A new series for ELA. We're now in the 3rd year of that. Middle school, different story. This is middle school reading. This is a very strong focus area for us. It doesn't look at all good. Again, I'm not somebody who's just going to present to you the good data. Middle school data is a big concern. Middle school math is a little bit better. It's increasing, but not really at a rate that we want to see it increase. Right? So Ms. Dr. Velasquez, our deputy superintendent, and I are working very closely with our central office team and the leadership of those schools. High school is up and down and up and down. Very unpredictable right now at the high school. And high school math, unfortunately, is following the statewide trend of going. Really concerned, we're right in the middle of our peer group, but that's no excuse. We need to do a lot better. But what I can say is where I feel we have invested the most heavily, both in dollars and time, right, we think was a wise investment. Because obviously those kids, as the elementary kids are getting better and better at math and reading, those students are going to move up into the upper grades, right? But that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work. Lots Links Mastery is about those multilingual learners I talked about earlier, right? This data is growing nicely. These are students who master English to a degree that they basically exit from multilingual services. They're no longer officially a multilingual learner. Again, really nice growth over time. Very, very competitive among our similar districts. This one is a personal project of mine, and it's a big point of pride for me and for the high schools. So while we have concern about those high school scores, this chart shows the number of college courses that kids completed while still in high school. We call that, generally, we call that dual credit. So if you're at the high school, there's a bunch of different ways. While still as a high school student, you can take college courses and get college credit. And it's been a focus of mine, and the high school has been doing a wonderful job of getting more kids to take those courses and having those kids have more success in those courses. So I think the total was, and depending on which version of the book you have, there was actually a little bit of a typo. I believe we had 560 Britain high school students earned credit in 640 courses. 640 courses. So kids are getting a start on their college education basically for free while they're still in school. So really strong growth over time, basically doubling it since the start of the data year. Graduation rate took a big dip in the previous year of this data to the earlier question about how old is this data. Unfortunately, this data is kind of old, but that's the most recently available on the state website. We're seeing that start to recover, the high school graduation rate. Before I get into the money, any other questions for me? I'm going to give you on where the money comes from and how we have to spend it. Yes, please.
These are comparable school districts that are.
Exactly.
What about the affluent? Are they showing, they have the same downward trend?
Good guess. As a statewide trend, when you look at the statewide data, yes, they do. Right? It was a distraction in so many ways for so many people, but yes, that's true. Absolutely.
Are they recovering at the same rate that we are?
When you zoom out to the state, I don't believe the statewide data has yet reached pre-COVID levels. We have in some cases. I don't know if the statewide averages have yet, and to be quite frank with you, sir, I don't care about Darien, so I don't look at their test scores very often. But at the statewide average, you are correct. That's correct. I think there's some part of that that we as a district can take credit for. Again, Dr. Sanders, our head of talent, is with us tonight. I mean, her department are in a lot of different ways to build a culture where we hope people feel valued. We just had a great conversation about how she doesn't just let new teachers come in and send them on their way. She brings these people, our teacher residents, together multiple times a year and has a support group for them. So there's no one magic sauce on that. It's really a lot of multiple things. And that's true at school level too, is principals checking in with teachers and doing our best to address concerns. I hope it's a little bit of, this might be pie in the sky, I hope it's a little bit of belief. I hope people are starting to see the story about our school district change a little bit. Again, that might be a little bit overly optimistic. And to be also quite blunt and honest, to look at the economy. The ability to find a job is not as easy, right? I think with the labor shortage we saw maybe 6 months, 12 months, 24 months ago, people knew they could quit a job and find another one, whether that was teaching or otherwise. And I think I'm starting to change the job market way a little bit too. So next is our revenue. This is where the money comes from, right? So as a school district, we have actually a really broad variety of where the money comes from. You've actually got an explanation of all of that just after this page in your book. This comes down to our being an urban school district. The urban school districts get more pots of money than somebody like a Simsbury or a Darien might. You're going to see a lot of comparisons here. And again, my job is to look forward and not look back. But you'll see what I mean in a moment. So there's a critical story that I'm going to get to at the end. Right? The moral of this whole story is a really scary budget for me. This slide tells the story why. It'll be easier to see in your book. The dark blue band, the dark blue bars, is the general fund budget that we receive from the city of New Britain. There's a couple of different ways we get money from the city of New Britain. The general fund budget is the dark blue bar. The light green bar you see in the last 3 years is money that came from the city's special revenue fund. There's a critical difference here. The general budget, basically, if we get an increase, that sets the new baseline. We get an increase, that's it. Called MBR, minimum budget requirement, the citywide. Very thankful for the increases that we've gotten from the council and from previously Mayor Stewart. There's a little bit of a wrinkle there, though. Some of those increases came in that green band. And if the money's in the green band, it's a one-time allocation. It doesn't count for next year. It's part of what's called the special revenue. It's coming out of what's called the special revenue. Thankful for the money band, and it's all found our chief financial officer who's here. We apply directly to those really costly special help. It comes from the city and it goes there. That's it. So thankful for the increases, but you'll notice the dark blue bar is almost flat. The dark blue bar increases, I believe it's only about 1.8% over these 6 years. And the green helps a little bit. Do you notice how our total cost goes up? Our total budget, our total spending goes up. That is just what was required really to keep up with inflation. So in those years when we've been increasing our budget, we didn't add staff, we didn't add programming, we didn't open a new school. Those increases basically helped us kind of stay the same. And what you notice is that yellow bar, that's the part that really got bigger and bigger as we go through. The yellow bar is what's called alliance funds, and that comes from the state. So as our costs were increasing, and we were getting modest increases from the city, these alliance increases are what helped us cope with inflation. We'll talk more about that when we talk about our costs. Here's the trouble, and here's why this is a really challenging budget. The state of Connecticut, as of right now, unless we all rally together and get them to change it, state of Connecticut has said that yellow bar will be flat. Not going away, but it's also not increasing. So I'll show you just how much our costs increase for just to buy the same stuff, to fund the same stuff. So I apologize, this is a little bit nerdy, it's a little bit heavy, but this is the story of where we are as a city right now. The city funds going up approximately 1.8%. The yellow bar, the alliance funds, helping us cope with our increasing costs. And then the fact that that yellow bar isn't going up next year unless we can tell our legislators that we need their help. Much time here because I really want to get to the next slide. But on page 30, again, this is for our older people. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the whole budget that, as we propose it for next year, the general fund is really the part we're talking about here. And what's important to know is that every municipality in Connecticut receives money from the state. That's called EC, that's educational cost share. That goes to the municipality to help the municipality for the board budget. And so that's why you see the two shades of blue. The darker shade of blue is the local taxpayers. The slightly brighter shade of blue is the amount that fund and then, but it started out as city fund. So this is a way to think about what's the impact on the local taxpayers. And I'm sorry, like this will be the sign if I'm this is the surrender sign if I'm going too deep, right? Or if I see your eyes glaze over and people walk out.
Dr. Gasper, we do have a question on the chat on the live stream.
Okay.
If you'd like, do you want to wait for questions or take it now?
I'll try to answer if it's pertinent to this part of the talk.
Yep, so this question's from Gail Sanders Connolly, and it's outplacement cost was budgeted at 3.4 million spread across 145 students. In next year's budget, the increase is to 14 million, roughly 24,000 per student. I know there's some are more than others, so this is just an average. Are we expecting a higher outplacement even at 1% increase in students? Is this population underfunded today?
Yes to all that. So we are expecting, because I have something I say it's only half the bill. Part of the superintendent's job is to predict the future and see around corners. This future is easy to predict, even though we're trying everything we can. The amount of students in Connecticut who are identified with special ed looks like this. The amount of students in Connecticut who are getting one of those outplacements looks like this. We've increased that budget in now my 4th year here. Every year I've been here, it's been even higher than we predicted it. The outplacements are incredibly challenging. One of the reasons the loving so much is because that $3.5 million we got from the city's special fund was offsetting those outplacements. And I said, that's a one-time thing. So every year we have to re-request. Now we have to re-request that $3.5 million just to go to the, that's another reason. The other reason is the state is taking some action, but as for now, these outplacement private facilities can change their tuition whenever they want. We're expecting a 10% increase. With private facilities, they can change their prices whenever they want. We're expecting 10% increase in that. And every student who gets an outplacement has to be transported. We know our contract says there will be a 6% increase. Talk more about costs in a second, though. Thank you, Ms. Sanders Connolly. This is my attempt to tell the story of the budget in one slide. So take a look at page 31. It's some of that same information, but I'm trying to lay it out in a way that hopefully, lets everybody into the conversation. So in this case, the green line across the bottom, that's the general fund. That's the predictable money that's allocated to the schools from the city of New Britain, first by the mayor and then approved by the council. So you can see, since the 2020-21 school year, it's moved from 125.7 million to 120 million. If you include those extra applications in the special revenue budget, you can see what that looks like. So the special revenue allocations will move that line up just a little bit up to that 131.6 million. So that's the money that's coming from the city of New Britain to the Board of Ed. I asked myself, is that reasonable? What does that number mean? So I use the Bureau of Labor Statistics to plot inflation. So if you go back to the start of this chart and then use the Bureau of Labor Statistics to plot inflation, the gray dashed line shows you what has happened to inflation since then. And let me say, our costs usually go up faster than the federal inflation number. So we think our cost to insure our employees will go up by 9%. Our buses are going up by 6%. Outplacement is going up by 10%. So even if we could have kept up with inflation, that would have been wonderful, right? Ideally, the green line would be at least parallel, maybe not on top of each other, but at least parallel with inflation. Okay, and this is what I mean. We're not looking backwards tonight, but the history is part of the story. Okay. Then I asked myself, Gasper, are you crazy? Are you asking for a wacky amount of money? So the purple dots show you the budget requests that I have submitted to the Board of Education. And I will say thank you for the support the Board of Education has supported this and moving my request forward to the city. So you can see this is the budget that I submitted to the board over time, what inflation looked like compared to that first year as a baseline. Budget's not the whole story, though. As I said, we get grants in many forms. So I also plotted the total budget from all local, state, and federal sources. That's a graph that looks like, if you do the same thing with inflation, line shows you what happened to inflation since that starting point. The times when the gold line is above the blue dash is COVID really important. Temporary money that we don't have since 2 years ago. So this is my attempt to tell the story of our budget in a single slide. This is all about the revenue, where the money comes from. Now we're going to get super nerdy. If you fall asleep a little bit, I understand. This is a comparison to our peer districts. It's actually one of my favorites. It's on page 33 in the book. So I asked myself, is the way in which each New Britain child is funded, how does that compare? And what would it take to catch up to some other people? I tell people all the time, I invented some math. If you don't like it, just think it's this way. I'm not offended. So if you take a look at the top, and again, this is, if you go on the State Department of Ed, if you want to check my numbers, the website's called EdSight, EdSight, like Ed Vision, EdSight. You can find all of these numbers there, except for my little calculation. So right now, New Britain, the local fund, the general fund, that green line from the last page, the last slide, allocates, and this is a combination of funding sources, not just the local, but so we can say it this way: each New Britain child is funded at $17,518.90 per kid per year. In short, we call that per pupil. Look at our other peer districts, however, from bottom to top, you'll see Bridgeport spends $18,300 per student. New London, $22,039, ranging up to Hartford, $24,900 per student. So in other words, Britain, each New Britain kid is funded at a lower level than all of these other districts. That's a combination of local decisions and state decisions. So, all right, Gasper, what would it take? What would it look like if? What would it look like if each New Britain kid was funded at the same level as each New London? Now, we can't just compare overall budgets, because New London's tiny and Hartford's huge. So what I do is I take the difference between them and us. That's that middle column there. So for example, New London is funded at $4,500 more per each child than each New Britain kid. So what would our budget have to look like? So then I take that difference and I multiply by our number of kids. So I take that $4,000, $4,500 more per kid, and I multiply it by our 10,000 kids. So if each New Britain child was funded at the same level as each New London child, we'd have to add $45 million to our budget. Let's not even talk about Hartford. Hartford's like winning the Powerball. If each New Britain kid was funded at the same level as each Hartford kid, you have to add $74 million to our budget. I'm not here to ask for 45 million, and I'm not here to ask for 74 million. Right? But these are the facts. Right? The only number I created is this last column. Well, I guess this one too, but these are all the official numbers. I just subtracted, and then I multiplied by 10,034. That's all this says. Please.
Let me know if I'm getting ahead and if you're covered.
Sure.
You talk about grade list.
It is on the page before this. It's not a slide, but if you look at page,
You know it already.
if you look at page 32,
I'm from the Democratic Conference.
Sure.
Years ago, well, us in our neighboring towns called bringing the list.
interesting.
And we got 10. We used to have a big grand list with all those big factors.
Yes.
And that was, glory days. Now, our grand list has disappeared. It's almost all houses. It's almost all houses for affordable housing, which is the only, New Britain turns out to be the only place where a person with low income person can live. And, they have more problems than the better income places that have the big grand lists. And so this is we need to have a radical approach to this. I think given our grand list, given our housing, given the makeup of our population, this is not going to change until we do what many other states have done. Open up the city bound, 169 towns, winners and losers. We need to have a big opening. Change is kind of on the horizon. The legislature is hammering away at these towns that refuse to build any affordable housing. And in Britain, they have most of the affordable housing in the whole area. So surrounding towns, which need to take up some of the burden with affordable housing type. Starting to move in that direction, but not fast. You guys are stuck with an impossible task, and you're doing a great job with that. But radical here, that we got to change what our school district is, bring in the affluent problems into our school district, have the same grand list, everybody grand list, meld them together, or else we're going to stay in the hole.
Well, I appreciate the support. I'm definitely not a housing specialist. I did get a question on this last year. On that page 32, if you look at the right-hand column, I was asked about tax exempt status. And they said, I heard we have a lot of property that's tax exempt. And if you look across that, we're kind of in the middle. We're kind of in the middle of these. Another contributing factor, I think, to what you're discussing. Thank you. This is funding mix. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but you'll see this is where districts get their money, state, federal, local, and other. Everybody's kind of in the same ballpark. In other words, I don't find any excuses here for a lot more money or a lot less money. Everybody's kind of right in the same relative ballpark for our comparison districts. Now, I promised you this would be quick, and I'm already going a little longer than I thought, but I'm thankful for the questions. Hopefully I'm not talking too much. This is page 36. We're talking about costs now. This is our cost for special education. This is not creative math by Ms. Alfano and her team. There's a very specific formula for how every district is supposed to figure this out. This is what just providing special education services costs, just from the local budget. As you see, it's $58 million. Excuse me. That's about 45% of our total budget. 45% of our total budget goes to the services that are mandated by federal law and state law. These children need good services. I'm not saying that. But philosophically, I agree with this gentleman in that I firmly believe some very courageous legislation is needed to help cities and towns fund these services. This is what I mean. That line goes up. It has been going. And what that does is it just creates a very big financial burden on every single one. And I'm not talking about the children themselves. They need and deserve services that are high quality. But if those that provide the services, like these outplacement people, can just keep raising their rates, then we are left to make really hard decisions. Either raise taxes quite a bit or take services away from other places. I'm not going to talk about this. It's there for your perusal.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
So,
This slide? Okay.
so, line item tuition special ed.
Yes.
You can see there's a $10 million. How many children or students are in that number? Is it the 146? Is that the same number?
It's actually a little bit more than that, but it's that's the majority of that number. Yes.
Okay, because again, if you in areas where we just a few dollars, right, salaries for teachers and things like this, but for 146 or in that range students, when there's 10,000 plus students in the district, I don't understand that.
I don't understand either. Here, I'm gonna give you the facts as clearly as I can, right? So when you factor in outplacement altogether, and again, we have to pay tuition, and sometimes it's not just the base tuition. Sometimes the base tuition is this, but if then that child needs BCBA services, psychology services, et cetera, these places also, they charge a base tuition, then they charge a la carte. So Ms. Alfano and I actually looked at the whole roster. It's actually about 170 kids because there's some kids, these are the private ones. Some kids also go to other school districts that provide these services. But the comparison you see on that chart, that's apples to apples, but we use the same number over time. If you look at the same number over time, if you look at our whole roster of every kid who gets an outplacement,
Right, I just did the math on that, so not to take up too much.
Please.
Not really.
please.
So $14 million in the budget divided by 170 students, give or take $80,000 per student per year. But if the Board of Ed doesn't fund that, we should expect that expense to those students.
The hardest part is right. So
Like state requirement or more morally?
state law and a moral requirement,
Okay, sure.
right? So this part of our work can get very contentious, right? It's based on a federal law called FAPE. Every kid deserves a free and appropriate public education. The appropriate is where we have sometimes dispute with families, right? So we think Tony could be served by this program, and the family says, no, we think Tony needs this program. And it's a lot of conversations, sometimes they get contentious. But in the end, it's a mutual decision to say, okay, Tony needs this program. I'm happy to keep talking even after the meeting, but what I'll say to you is this is everything about how special education, that it's everything about the way in which special education is funded is broken, in my opinion. It's broken, right? So what's factored in, it was on our revenue pages, I believe, is we're supposed to get a reimbursement. And I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. But if an outplacement costs, for one child costs the district $200,000, we're supposed to pay the first 4.5 multiple of what we usually spend, that 17,000 number. So no matter what, we're responsible for the first 85,000 or so. So if it costs 200, that means there's an additional 115,000. Now, Ms. Alfano, what's our reimbursement supposed to be? The state is supposed to give us 91% of that 115 back. They never do. Usually it's around 70%. Sometimes it's as low as 62%. So the state has made this promise that they never fund. And the worst part is we never know until we're into the budget year. We're into the actual year of spending this money, how much we're going to get back. Every district in Connecticut is struggling with this here. I really do appreciate your question. It's exactly one of our biggest budget drivers. It's this big of an increase, I said earlier, because that jumps from that 3 million number to 14 million number, a big chunk of that is the $3.5 million that was a one-time allocation from the city that we have to re-request. So it's super complicated, but your question is perfect. And I'm happy to stay later and give you more detail if you like. Sure.
So if that's going to be mandatory that you have to fund that special education out of other educated budget.
If we don't get very strong relief from the city and state, yes.
And who's holding the state accountable?
Hopefully we are. I can tell you what I'm doing as an individual superintendent and the groups I belong to, what we're doing. Last year, the state made some advances, right? So there's a law that is happening now, not yet in effect, where they're going to set the rates of these outplacement, right? Basically be on a state schedule for how much they can charge. I don't think that's yet complete. I think that's still in the study phase. And they created a new grant called the SEED grant, the Special Education Expansion and Development Grant. The trouble with the SEED grant is you have to invent new programs to spend that money on. So that SEED grant doesn't help us at all with existing costs. It doesn't help us at all with existing costs. It says, try to create some new programs or expand existing programs to try to help you with your costs. Please.
To clarify, that covers the $10 million that's the budget.
The SEED grant, I don't remember the our share was 1.7 million. I think the total might be bigger, might be in the 30s. I'll say this, and again, I'm happy to stay later and get as detailed as you like. This is what I mean by everything about how special ed is funded. Right, that reimbursement I just talked about, the 91% that's supposed to come back to us, that sometimes is 62% and sometimes it's 70%. We never know. This is all final when I make our best guess based on past trends. And it happens after the fact. It's less than they promised, and we never know how much it's going to be. It happens after the fact. So your points are exactly perfect. I mean, this needs courageous legislation to say these kids need and deserve high quality services, but municipalities like ours don't deserve to have to pay for them in this way. And the question is correct. Unless we get substantial help in the coming year from the state and the city, the board and I will face incredibly difficult challenges of having to cut stuff that's not mandatory by law to fund the things that are mandatory by law. Go ahead, please.
Another question, kind of similar, but there in the beginning slide, I think the New Britain district, the percentage of children with disabilities or something like that, like 1 in 4 students.
Absolutely.
Is this, what is the range, I guess, for disability? Is it medically or like, you know what I mean? Doctor's notes be included?
Okay, something else we could, somebody could do 3 dissertations about this topic, but I'll give you the shortest version I can, and again, happy to state. So I want to say it as many times as I can. These kids deserve high quality service. So sometimes I feel guilty just talking about the cost. But this is real because we are at the point where kids who are non-special ed are going to start losing services or resources because of the way in which this is funded. I think it's broken. So that's a continuum. That's that fate thing. We call it the least restrictive environment. So our job, every educator's job, is to give Tony just enough service. For some kids, that might mean he shares a para in the classroom. There might be 3 or 4 or 5 special ed students in one classroom. The only thing they need is a para educator who can come up beside them and guide them, rephrase or restructure the lesson. That would kind of be at the lower end. The far other end of that is going to be the outplacements. A little bit back from the outplacements are the programs I talked about earlier called self-contained, where we run those in-house to keep the kids close to home so they're not on the bus for an hour each way, lowers our cost, right? The key, the bridges, the pathways programs that we run here. and then everything in between. Right, so, yeah, but, really great questions. Brian?
We have a question on the live stream asking if, despite this current budget where we're at right now, did teachers' salaries increase this past year, and did para-educator salaries increase this past year?
Yes to both.
Okay.
I don't have the contracts in front of me. Generally, our labor contracts increase at rates that are less than 3%. In other words, those don't keep up with inflation either. Thank you, really, thank you for your engagement. I truly appreciate the questions. This just talks about just the increases. And this is a staggering number. I want to say a very hearty thank you to the Board of Education for trusting me enough to present this budget. Some superintendents, they have to do all kinds of stuff behind the scenes, and then they show up with a 5% budget or 6%. I'm really thankful to the support of the board for me as superintendent. This is a wacky number for a superintendent to present, but this is the number it takes. The only increase in the budget you just heard about is that I chose to make is the increase in the outplacement special. For everything else, this is what I call a level services budget. Same number of teachers, same number of buses, same insurance for our employees, et cetera. Same amount of copy paper, same number of presentation clickers. Just to keep things the same with that outplacement increase is $18.9 million, or a requested increase of 14.8%. And I said, my first words to the board is, I know the political realities of what I'm presenting tonight. I know that's not politically viable to ask the city for 14.8%. I know we've got a lot of conversations to come, but that's the reality. That's what it takes not to lose teachers, not to lose para-educators, not to lose copy paper or field trips or online subscriptions to learning platforms. That's flat. Flat services, except for that increase in special education. Believe me, I get a lump in my throat talking about it. So this is why we're going to end by talking about advocacy. If you chart that, it looks like this, right? This is that big thing in tuition. I kind of did a little scribble on the back of a piece of paper. If we had continued to get those alliance increases, this is the advocacy part. The state money, where a long time ago, which to you must now feel like 6 hours ago, because I've been up here talking. When the blue bar stayed almost flat and the gold bar got bigger, that was $8 million increase for the current year and last year. If we had that again, and that $3.5 million that we had gotten from the city in the special fund, if we didn't have to re-request that, my request to the board would have gone down to, I think, less than 6%, rather than 14%. Outcome of where the money has come from, right? It's right. And this will sound crazy. I sound crazy to myself every time I say it to the board. Believe it or not, for me as a professional, this is a boring budget. It's very boring. I would love to come to the board to say, look, I need $5.2 million to create a new school for kids with autism. That would be an interesting project. I feel fulfilled to increase the services to the kids of New Britain. This is what is required to keep services the same. And it's a scary number. Again, I know the political reality. So this is our request. It looks like this. Going forward, it's always somewhere between 85 and 90% of the costs that we have are driven by contracts or the law. So people often say, well, there must be something you can cut. We already prioritize our everything but people gets prioritized in the way that we design the budget. So every principal, homeschool, Smalley school, every department in central office, they come to me with a prioritized budget. I know that if I cut the stuff that they already told me they could most easily do without, that's not fluff. That's like, well, we'll do field trips and we'll get rid of this online platform that people like. We cut that. We call that our priority threes. It's about $360,000. So yes, we will probably look there if we have to, but it doesn't help much with that. And I've used this way of making budgets for a long time. I've never had to cut the priority twos. We had to cut the priority twos. People would really, really feel it. So here's the kind of headline at the end. This is what we're asking for. This is what's needed. Again, I'm so thankful to the members of Common Council that are joining us tonight. It's not fun for me. It gives me a lump in my stomach to say this, but this is what's required. So I think while I've been talking, Ryan sent around an advocacy one-pager. Tells you how to interact with Common Council, tells you how to interact with state representatives. We've created a web page just for this effort. It was up there earlier. I think it's csdnb.org/budget advocacy. There's even sample letters that you can send to the council and to our legislators if you choose. And I was just meeting with Mayor Sanchez today. Dr. Velasquez and I met with. He said, your voice matters, both locally. When you hear or see about it's time to testify. Tell people how you feel about the school district, right? Here's if you look on those sample letters on our webpage, you'll see it. But here's the short and the skinny of it. We need the state just the ECS, educational cost share. It hasn't been adjusted. My friend Mr. Greenleaf will remember, it hasn't been adjusted since 2013. Meaning that rate that we now call up to, and now we're going to go 12. So the state has done nothing to help school districts, not just us. The state has done nothing to help school districts with inflation since 2013. I don't know, how much does a bag of potato chips cost now compared to? How much does a kilowatt of electricity cost now compared to? Right? We pay all those things. We pay people for our buses, kilowatts of electricity, boxes of copy paper, school buses on a per day basis. So I want to say, a very hearty thanks to you for being here. A lot of this might have sounded doom and gloom. I'm not giving up. I'm going to be doing as much as I feel I can as superintendent. I've already put out a request to every principal to meet with their PCOs, right? You're welcome to call on me at any time, contact my office. If you want even more charts and graphs, you'll be my best friend, because I love charts and graphs. But I want to close just by saying, this is serious. It's the most serious budget I've had in my life. I don't want to see New Britain's kids I'm not blaming the city because they're here. I don't want to see New Britain's kids get screwed any more than they've already been. That $45 million difference between us and New London, that makes me mad. Right? And that's all the funding. That's not just local funding. Right? You're going to tell me New Britain kids deserve $45 million less than New London kids? That makes me mad. Voice matters. Right. On that same webpage, you can hear or you can read all of the email addresses for our legislators. You can make a difference. And I'm going to be doing everything I can over the next few months. With that, I'm happy to take a few more questions. I'm going to stay if you just want to ask something one-on-one. Anything else that I can answer other than thanking you for your time tonight? Basically, yes, yeah.
And so it's been year over year. And so how do we get out of that?
One 156 funding. For funding or for outcomes. We're getting there. That's why I said, if you look at those elementary test scores, it's starting to happen, right? When I arrived, we ranked last in math and English. We no longer rank last in math. Right? It's happening, but when the board interviewed me, I told them this was 3 to 5 years of work at least, and this is here.
So
My game plan is making this kind of plea as often as I can and as well as my talents allow me to make it, right? I am connected with my state organizations, with my legislators. They got an email from me just today requesting that I meet with them in person. I'm one of the 3 chairpersons for a group called CAUSE, Connecticut Association of Urban Superintendents. We just signed a contract to try to get some press attention to this. So I'm doing what I can in the public realm to draw attention to it. And it's hard because you will be much more listened to than superintendents, right? We get called complainers, we get called, oh, you're just throwing money at it. People have all these nasty things that they say to us because they think we make too much money or whatever the reason. But my game plan is in this talk tonight. It's to help you and encourage you, all of you, to be as politically active as possible. Because quite simply, without a reckoning at the state legislative level, this is going to continue happening, right? But I love that you bring up the rankings because, like I said, I'm competitive and it bothers me too. But what I'll tell you is, I do the math in my head. For every 1% we get better, that's 100 kids. And in my head, I see myself standing at the head of a school bus. That's 2 school buses worth, it's just a single percent. There's 2 school buses worth of kids that are more prepared for the future that they want. I'm doing what I can. If you have ideas for other things that I can do, please reach out. If there's people that I'm not talking to that I should, right? I'm going to be reaching out to lots of people across the community. If you've got a group you want me to sit down with, it's 5 people or 50, I'm happy to come. I'm happy to come.
We don't get funding.
It's a huge worry for me, and that's why tonight's presentation sounds the way it does. I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can, but also realistic. There are some states where school districts get to raise their own taxes. Connecticut is one of them. So we have to petition to our local elected officials and our state elected officials. Perfect question. Please.
And I go back to something at the very beginning, but when you have you identified any causes or what specific interventions are happening to address those cases?
Thanks very much. So we took a hard look really at the day, and we found out that kids were only spending about 40% of their day in academics. So lots of thanks to Tyler Richardson from my team who oversees the middle schools and the high schools. Both of the 2 big middle schools have a revamped schedule this year that includes an intervention period for every single day. And kids get a chance at reading and or math intervention, then they kind of flip-flop. You don't need intervention, get a chance at enrichment. So we're doing that, and Dr. Velasquez is really leaning in hard with those principles about getting really specific about their data and identifying what exactly we need to do. But the schedule is just one example of what we've done so far. I've really realized there's a saying about superintendents is your calendar is your priorities, right? If you look at the soup's calendar, you find out what he did today, what is he prioritizing. Our middle school day didn't prioritize. So we think we've made some intervention period for every kid. Other questions? This day, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. Please do consider taking some advocacy action. We're happy to support you. Appreciate the support.
End stream.